Hello and welcome back to Start Here with UDL. We're going to take a look at the GCDC strategy today, one of our favorites. So GCDC is a strategy for figuring out how to say unfamiliar words and guess their meaning. And so we start using this around fourth grade. It's real popular in middle school. I used it with my ninth graders and they liked it just fine. There are some hand motions that go with it. So if you'd like to look at the small window in the bottom corner of your screen, I can show them to you as I walk through them. So GCDC is the name of the strategy. It is a strategy for figuring out how to say unfamiliar words and guess their meanings. This includes scientific words and idioms and maybe some phrases that use figurative language. So anytime I run into a word that I don't know. So if you're using the notice and note signposts, you might be calling this word gaps. In a lot of our schools, they're using the GCDC learning strategy when they run into the word gaps signpost. And that's a nice match of providing a strategy for a student once they've understood that they need one to close the gap between what they know and what they don't know, which is part of metacognition. All right, so the first step when I run into a word that I don't know, like anti-disestablishmentarianism, is to go on and guess. And so I have my students just go on and guess, read to the end of the sentence, and use any hints to guess what the word is. And I often say, I want you to go on and guess. I want you to read to the end of the sentence, but in my ninth graders, read to the end of the paragraph. Take a look at the rest of the context. So this isn't guessing a word like we tell students not to do when they're little. I don't want you to guess a word just by looking at word parts. I want you to read to the end of the sentence and use your context clues. That's an empowerment strategy for you. So go on and guess, read to the end of the sentence or the paragraph or the passage, and I want you to use your context clues as hints to guess what the word is. And if you don't have a clue, you're going to move to the next step. So the strategy is called GCDC. It's a strategy for figuring out how to say unfamiliar words and guess their meaning. The first step is to use your context clues. Go on and guess. Context clues. So we're going to read to the end of the sentence. We're going to read to the end of the paragraph. We might even read to the end of that passage. If I can't figure it out from context clues, I'm going to chop, underline, and say. I'm going to chop off the prefix, chop off the suffix, underline the root, and say it to myself because I might know it. So I might chop off a prefix and say, oh, that prefix means, chop off the suffix, say, oh, that prefix means. I'd underline the root to myself and say, oh, that means, or the base, oh, that means, and say it. Because sometimes if you say it to yourself, you're going to know what the word is. But anti-disestablishmentarianism was too long, so I couldn't do it. So my strategy, once again, GCDC, because I'm trying to figure out how to say an unfamiliar word and guess their meaning. First thing I do is go on and guess, read to the end of the sentence and use any hints there are, read to the end of the paragraph, might be in there, and read to the end of the passage, might be in there, because that's using my context clues, which is an empowerment strategy. Couldn't figure out anti-disestablishmentarianism from that. And so I chop, underline, say, chop off the prefix, chop off the suffix, underline the root, say it to yourself. You might know it. And I couldn't do it because anti-disestablishmentarianism was just too long. So instead, I'm going to draw it. What I'm going to do is actually draw the lines in the word. I'm going to segment off the prefix because there might be more than one. I'm going to segment off the suffix, and there might be more than one, and underline the root or the base, and I'm going to translate underneath. So if I was doing that, I might do anti-disestablishmentarianism. I can't even say it. Anti-disestablishmentarianism. And I would draw a line for the anti, draw a line after the dis, underline establish, draw a line at meant, Aryanism, and then I would say veterinarian is an Aryan, is a person, ism is a belief system, anti is against, dis is not. So I'm translating underneath, establish is put in place. And then what I'll do is I will guess my word meaning based on all of the analysis I have used by drawing all my lines and translating. And then I would just check at the end to see if it's right. Check with an adult or a peer or a dictionary. And so I have used GCDC. I went ahead and I go on and guess, read to the end and see if you can use your context clues, chop, underline, say. Sometimes you can do it in your head and translate. like photosynthesis. Photo is going to be in light. But I can't do that in my head with something long. So sometimes you've got to draw it like anti-disestablishmentarianism, put the translation underneath, guess the word meaning, and then check to see if you're right. And so that is GCDC. It's a great one for fourth grade, fifth grade, and on up. I use it as an adult. And so when we're thinking about the Virginia Developing Skilled Readers and Building Reading Stamina Standards in DSRE, I chose seventh grade because it's right in the middle. We're supposed to be using reading strategies as needed to aid and monitor comprehension when we encounter a challenging section of text. So one part of a challenging section of text, in fact, is when you run into a word that you don't know. GCDC can be used as a sense-making strategy. So a lot of times we talk about things like text structure, summarizing, or like the notice and note signposts. But being able to attack an unfamiliar word is also one of the ways to do that. So let's look at this through a UDL lens of learner agency. Our students can choose to use the GCDC strategy, which we've taught to them through using gradual release of responsibility. We've used some dual coding by adding in some hand motions. I've got an anchor chart on the wall. It is a mnemonic strategy, makes it a little stickier, reduces the cognitive load. And they'll be able to use this while they're systematically building the vocabulary and word knowledge based on grade level content, which is my goal in my inclusive classroom. So I could use it in order to do RV1B, which is using context to determine the meaning of a word or phrase. There we go, 100%. That's that go on and guess. I can also apply my knowledge of Greek and Latin roots and affixes to predict the meaning of unfamiliar words. Excellent. I could have used it in fourth grade with that same standard. I can use it in ninth grade, similar standard, but I can also use it right here in seventh grade. So I've got my context and my roots and affixes all within the GCDC strategy. And it's a learner-owned strategy. So a teacher doesn't need to prompt me. I can practice using this on my own, which is going to be a real help for me in other content areas and moving forward in the upper grade levels. I can also use the relationship between particular words, like a synonym or an antonym, so that I could use like the word parts of I know something is a synonym or an antonym, and I can predict some meaning based on those context clues. A lot of times we'll have like our but or however, and I see that they're using those as opposites. I can use construction or meaning. I can use the construction of our figurative language. We're not going to get into that one right now. A little bit on connotation if I'm using my context clues. And then, of course, I'm using my word reference materials in order to make sure that I know how to pronunciate, I can't pronunciate it, how to pronounce it and figure out the precise meaning and to confirm what I've learned. And I'll also be able to use those to add to my Greek and Latin roots, because if I've learned the one and I've looked it up, I actually can add to my vocabulary from that. So I'm going to go back real fast. So GCDC is a strategy for figuring out how to say unfamiliar words and guess their meaning. Step one is I go on and guess, read to the end using my context clues. I chop, chop, underline, say. You can also do it with your finger. Chop, chop, underline, say. Because I'm going to chop off the prefix, chop off the suffix, underline the root, and say it to myself because I mightn't recognize it. If it's too long or I need to have some scaffolding that I'm using, I'm just going to go ahead and draw the lines and draw the meaning underneath, and I'm going to guess the word meaning based on my translations. And then I'm going to check that it's right. And that is a great learner-owned strategy to promote learner agency in determining unfamiliar words in any context area. Great for long transfer, far transfer. Thanks for hanging with us.